The dark side of positivity. In a world obsessed with happiness, have you ever felt guilty for being sad? Have you ever been told to just think positive when all you wanted was to be heard? What if I told you that the very thing meant to uplift you is actually keeping you trapped? We live in a time where positivity is no longer just an emotion, it's an expectation. You're not allowed to feel down, complain, or even acknowledge struggle without someone telling you to look on the bright side. But what if this relentless pressure to stay positive is doing more harm than good? In this video, we'll expose the hidden dangers of toxic optimism, a culture that forces you to suppress your struggles, blame yourself for your problems, and turn happiness into an exhausting performance. We'll explore how corporations profit from your pursuit of happiness, why negative emotions are essential, and what true freedom from forced positivity looks like. This isn't just another self-help talk. This is the unfiltered truth about the happiness industry and how it controls you. Stay until the end, because the way you think about happiness is about to change forever. The dictatorship of happiness. Why you're forced to be positive. The pressure to be happy. From the moment we wake up, we are bombarded with one message: be happy. Motivational quotes flood our social media feeds. Productivity gurus tell us that a positive mindset is the key to success. Even in the workplace, toxic positivity thrives. Companies expect employees to stay motivated, no matter how exhausted they are. But what happens when happiness is no longer a personal experience, but an obligation? We are taught that feeling sad, frustrated, or even neutral is unacceptable. You must always smile, always push forward, always act as if everything is fine, even when it's not. This pressure turns happiness into something artificial, something that must be performed rather than genuinely felt. But here's the truth. Real happiness doesn't come from constant positivity. It comes from the ability to experience life's full range of emotions, both the highs and the lows. The fear of being negative. Have you ever hesitated before expressing sadness, frustration, or anger? Have you ever felt like people might judge you for being too negative? This isn't a coincidence. It's conditioning. We are raised to fear negativity. If you express sadness, you're seen as weak. If you complain about an issue, you're called ungrateful. If you acknowledge a struggle, you're labeled as someone who is bringing the mood down. This societal pressure forces us to wear a mask, a constant performance of happiness to fit in. But the more we suppress our real emotions, the more disconnected we become from ourselves. The irony? Suppressing negative emotions doesn't make them disappear. It only makes them grow stronger, buried beneath layers of forced smiles and fake optimism. Happiness as a social obligation. In many ways, happiness has become a social currency. The happier you appear, the more likable and successful you seem. People who constantly radiate positivity are admired, while those who express hardship are often ignored or avoided. This is why social media thrives on curated perfection. People only show their best moments, their biggest achievements, their happiest memories. And because we only see one side of people's lives, we start to believe that happiness is the default state of existence. But it's not. Happiness is a moment, not a permanent state, and the expectation to maintain it 24/7 is unnatural, unhealthy, and deeply damaging. The illusion of choice. Perhaps the most dangerous part of this forced happiness culture is that it convinces us that happiness is purely a choice. We're told, if you're not happy, it's your own fault. You just need to change your mindset. Happiness is within you. Just choose it. But is it really that simple? Can someone struggling with depression, poverty, or trauma simply choose to be happy? This idea shifts the blame onto individuals rather than addressing the real systemic issues that cause suffering in the first place. The reality is this: happiness isn't something you can force. And true emotional well-being comes not from suppressing negativity, but from learning how to navigate both the light and the dark sides of life. The positive vibes only culture. We see it everywhere, on t-shirts, coffee mugs, and Instagram captions. Positive vibes only. It sounds harmless, even uplifting. But what if this phrase, repeated endlessly, is actually harming us more than helping us? The idea that we should only focus on the positive is a trap. It makes us believe that our problems, struggles, and negative emotions are unnatural and should be ignored. It convinces us that negativity is the enemy, something to be avoided at all costs. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Life is not always positive. Struggles exist. Pain exists. Ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. It just forces us to bury them deeper. And the more we suppress, the more these emotions find other, more damaging ways to surface. So why is this toxic optimism so widely accepted? Because it makes life feel simpler. It allows people to avoid hard conversations, dismiss uncomfortable truths, and pretend that everything is fine. But at what cost? The dangerous myth of mindset. Alone. If you just change your mindset, everything will get better. It's a phrase we hear constantly, especially in self-help culture. The idea is that your mindset is the key to all your problems. If you're struggling, you just need to think differently. But this idea is misleading. While mindset is important, it is not the only factor that shapes our lives. Someone struggling with mental health issues, financial instability, or deep trauma cannot simply think their problems away. Toxic optimism pushes this harmful narrative, making people feel like if they're unhappy, it's their own fault. It tells them that they're not trying hard enough, not being positive enough, not manifesting happiness correctly. Instead of addressing real struggles, toxic positivity shifts the blame onto individuals, convincing them that they just need to fix their attitude. This kind of thinking erases real pain and forces people into a cycle of self-blame, one that only makes things worse. How stay positive silences real issues. One of the worst aspects of toxic optimism is how it silences people. Imagine telling someone about a difficult situation only for them to respond with, "Just stay positive, it'll all work out." Everything happens for a reason. Don't focus on the bad. Think about the good things in life. While these responses might sound kind, they do something dangerous. They dismiss real pain. Instead of listening and offering support, they minimize struggles and make people feel guilty for not being happy. This happens in personal relationships, workplaces, and even mental health discussions. Instead of addressing real problems, abuse, injustice, burnout, people are told to simply change their perspective. But ignoring an issue doesn't make it disappear. If anything, it allows it to grow worse. Toxic optimism turns real problems into something that must be endured silently, rather than solved. It teaches people that their emotions are a burden and that speaking up about struggles makes them weak. This, in turn, creates a culture of silence where people suffer in isolation rather than seeking help. When positivity becomes pressure, perhaps the most insidious part of toxic optimism is that it creates pressure to always be happy, even when happiness isn't possible. People start to feel guilty for their negative emotions. They hide their struggles to avoid being labeled as negative or ungrateful. They force themselves to smile even when they're breaking inside. This is emotional suppression at its worst, and studies show that constantly suppressing emotions leads to increased stress and anxiety, higher risk of burnout and depression, a sense of disconnection from oneself and others. We were never meant to feel only happiness, sadness, anger, frustration. They all serve a purpose. They help us understand our needs, set boundaries, and grow. But toxic optimism tells us to erase these emotions, pretending they don't exist. And that's not just unhealthy, it's dangerous. The truth? Positivity should be a tool, not a prison. If happiness is forced, it's not happiness at all. It's just another mask we wear. Blaming the individual, how society makes everything your fault. The illusion of personal responsibility. We live in a world where everything seems to come down to one simple idea. If you're struggling, it's your fault. Didn't get the job. You didn't work hard enough. Struggling financially? You made bad choices. Feeling depressed? You're not thinking positively enough. Society has conditioned us to believe that our success or failure is entirely in our hands. If we're not thriving, it must be because we're lazy, unmotivated, or not manifesting the right energy. This idea is everywhere, from self-help books to social media influencers selling the dream of you can do anything if you just try hard enough. But what happens when people do try, when they give everything they have, and still fail? Instead of questioning the system, they question themselves. This toxic individualism keeps people trapped in shame. It convinces them that they are the problem, not the structural inequalities, economic instability, or mental health struggles that often play a much bigger role in their difficulties. The hidden forces controlling your life. While we're told that success is purely about personal effort, the truth is much more complex. Consider the realities of modern life. The cost of living has skyrocketed while wages remain stagnant. Mental health struggles are at an all-time high due to constant stress, digital exhaustion, and isolation. Social mobility has declined, meaning that no matter how hard some people work, they will never reach the level of success they were promised. And yet, we rarely hear discussions about systemic barriers. Instead, society shifts the blame onto individuals. This is no accident. Keeping people focused on self-improvement prevents them from questioning why they are struggling in the first place. If you're convinced that your failures are personal, you won't look at the bigger picture or demand change. This is why companies push the idea of work harder rather than addressing toxic work cultures. It's why mental health discussions often focus on self-care rather than the overwhelming stress caused by unrealistic expectations and burnout. The more we blame ourselves, the less we hold the system accountable. The rise of hustle culture and the self-made myth. One of the biggest ways society reinforces individual blame is through hustle culture. We've been told that grind now, rest later is the only path to success. That billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos became rich because they worked harder than everyone else. That if we're not successful, it's because we're not hustling hard enough. But this is a dangerous myth. Many so-called self-made millionaires came from privilege, connections, or generational wealth. Studies show that working harder does not always equal more success. In fact, many people burn out before seeing any reward. Hustle culture glorifies overwork, stress, and exhaustion, but rarely talks about the cost of it. This myth keeps people chasing an illusion. It convinces them that their struggles are due to personal failure rather than an unfair system that only benefits a few. And the most dangerous part? It makes people ashamed to admit when they need help, because society tells them that asking for support is a sign of weakness. Breaking free from the blame game. So, how do we break free from this trap? The first step is recognizing the lie. Success is not just about effort, it's also about opportunity, privilege, and systemic factors. Mental health struggles are not a personal failure. They are often the result of stress, trauma, and societal pressures. Struggles with finances, career, or self-worth are not always about laziness. They are often about economic conditions and the unrealistic expectations placed on individuals. This doesn't mean that effort is meaningless, but it does mean that we must stop blaming ourselves for things that are beyond our control. The second step, rejecting toxic individualism. Instead of suffering in silence, we must demand better working conditions, mental health support, and realistic expectations. Instead of glorifying hustle culture, we should embrace rest, balance, and sustainability. Instead of believing success is purely about hard work, we should recognize the role of privilege, connections, and access to resources. The truth is, you are not the problem. Society just wants you to think you are, so you never realize the system itself is broken. The business of positivity, selling the dream of eternal happiness. Happiness has always been a desirable state, but in the modern world it has become a product to be bought and sold. Everywhere you look, companies promise happiness through a new car, a designer handbag, a luxury vacation, or even a self-help book. Social media influencers sell the idea that if you just buy their course, program, or lifestyle brand, you too can live a perfectly joyful life. This isn't an accident. The happiness industry is worth billions. From wellness apps to motivational seminars, from diet plans to self-improvement books, the idea that happiness can be purchased has become one of the most powerful marketing tools of our time. But here's the problem. If happiness were so easy to achieve, why do we constantly need more? If one purchase, one experience, or one mindset shift could fix everything, why do we always feel like something is missing? Why does the goalpost of happiness keep moving, no matter how much we consume? Because true happiness cannot be bought, and companies know this, but they don't want you to realize it. The false promise of retail therapy. Have you ever felt down only to go out and buy something to cheer yourself up? This is known as retail therapy, and it's one of the most effective ways companies keep people consuming. Shopping triggers a short burst of dopamine, a feel-good chemical in the brain that makes you feel better temporarily. But the key word here is temporary. That excitement of a new gadget, outfit, or car fades fast. The boost of happiness you get from spending money disappears almost instantly. Instead of long-term fulfillment, we're left with a craving for the next thing, the next purchase, upgrade, or experience. This cycle is what keeps businesses thriving. They sell you an emotion, not a product. They promise that buying something will change your life, when in reality it only changes your brain chemistry for a few fleeting moments. And once that feeling wears off, you're back to square one, ready to spend again. The toxicity of feel-good advertising marketing has evolved far beyond selling products. Now, brands sell lifestyles, identities, and emotions. Think about the last major ad campaign you saw. Chances are it didn't focus on the actual product. It focused on how that product would make you feel. Luxury brands don't sell bags, they sell status. Wellness brands don't sell fitness plans, they sell self-worth. Tech brands don't sell gadgets, they sell the promise of an easier, happier life. And perhaps the most powerful emotional tool they use? FOMO, fear of missing out. If you don't buy this product, you're missing out on happiness. If you don't sign up for this program, you're failing yourself. If you don't keep up with the latest trends, you're falling behind. This emotional manipulation is designed to keep you feeling incomplete, so you never stop consuming. And the worst part, it works. Escaping the trap of commercialized happiness. So, how do we escape this endless cycle? First, recognize the illusion. No product, experience, or external purchase will give you permanent happiness. The happiness industry profits from your dissatisfaction. The less content you feel, the more likely you are to spend. Marketing thrives on creating artificial desires, urging you to chase things you didn't even want before you saw the ad. Second, redefine what happiness means to you. Does it truly come from external things, or does it come from relationships, purpose, creativity, and peace of mind? Is it about constantly achieving and acquiring, or about learning to be content with what you already have? Finally, take control of your consumption. Before making a purchase, ask yourself, is this something I truly need, or is it something I've been made to want? Instead of seeking fulfillment through consumption, explore free or low-cost sources of happiness like nature, meaningful conversations, or creative hobbies. The happiness industry doesn't want you to find real, lasting joy, because if you were truly content, you wouldn't need them anymore. The burnout of always smiling, the hidden cost of forced positivity, the pressure to always be happy. We live in a world that tells us happiness is a choice. No matter what happens, we're expected to keep smiling, stay positive, and push through any difficulties with a cheerful attitude. This belief is everywhere, on social media, in corporate culture, even in personal relationships. If you're struggling, you're told to look on the bright side. If you're exhausted, you just need to think positive. If you're grieving, hurt, or frustrated, people tell you to cheer up and focus on the good. At first, this might sound like good advice, but what happens when positivity becomes an obligation rather than a genuine feeling? What happens when you're no longer allowed to be anything other than happy? This is where the danger begins. The pressure to always be happy doesn't just exhaust people, it erases real emotions, making it harder to process pain, grief, and frustration in a healthy way. And when we're constantly suppressing how we truly feel, burnout is inevitable. Emotional suppression, the psychological toll. Forcing yourself to be positive at all times may seem like a harmless mindset, but suppressing emotions has serious consequences. Psychologists have long studied the effects of emotional repression when people bottle up negative emotions instead of expressing them. The results? Increased stress and anxiety, higher risk of depression, chronic fatigue and emotional exhaustion, weakened immune system and physical health problems. The brain and body are not designed to be happy all the time. Sadness, frustration, and anger are not weaknesses. They are natural and necessary emotions. Just as we need pain receptors to know when we're injured, we need negative emotions to understand what's wrong in our lives. Suppressing these feelings doesn't make them disappear. It just delays them until they explode in unhealthy ways. The irony? The more people force themselves to be relentlessly positive, the more unhappy they become in the long run. The workplace and the toxicity of good vibes only. One of the most dangerous places where forced positivity thrives is the workplace. Modern companies love to promote a culture of optimism, encouraging employees to be enthusiastic, passionate, and upbeat no matter how overwhelming their workload is. Feeling stressed? Just stay motivated. Exhausted from overwork? Find your passion. Burned out? Have a positive mindset and everything will work out. This is corporate gaslighting. Instead of addressing real issues, unmanageable workloads, unfair expectations, and toxic environments, companies push the illusion of positivity as a way to keep employees compliant. Even worse, employees who express exhaustion, frustration, or dissatisfaction are often seen as negative or not a team player. People fake enthusiasm out of fear of losing their jobs. Burned out employees push through exhaustion to maintain the illusion of a positive attitude. Over time, this leads to higher turnover rates, severe stress, and long-term mental health damage. When positivity becomes a weapon to silence legitimate concerns, it stops being helpful. It becomes harmful. The path to authentic well-being. So, how do we break free from the toxic cycle of forced happiness? Allow yourself to feel. Happiness is just one part of the human emotional spectrum. Sadness, frustration, and disappointment are just as valid. Instead of suppressing these feelings, learn to process and express them in a healthy way. Redefine what positivity actually means. True positivity isn't about denying negative emotions, it's about finding balance. Real well-being comes from emotional resilience, not emotional suppression. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to have bad days. And it's okay to be honest about them. Challenge toxic positivity in your environment. If someone tells you to just think positive, remind them that real growth comes from facing emotions, not avoiding them. In workplaces, advocate for mental health awareness instead of empty motivational slogans. In personal relationships, create spaces where people feel safe to be honest about their struggles. True happiness doesn't come from faking positivity. It comes from accepting reality, processing emotions, and building genuine resilience. Because in the end, a forced smile is far more exhausting than an honest frown. The burnout of always smiling, the hidden cost of forced positivity. Imagine waking up every day and putting on a mask, not a physical one, but an emotional disguise. You're exhausted, but you tell yourself to push through. You feel frustrated, but you suppress it. You're on the verge of collapse, but instead of acknowledging it, you plaster on a smile and repeat the mantra. Stay positive. Keep going. Good vibes only. This is the reality of toxic positivity, the unspoken rule that no matter how overwhelmed, anxious, or broken you feel, you must always appear happy. Society has created a world where negativity is unacceptable, and happiness isn't just encouraged, it's demanded. At first, it seems harmless. Who wouldn't want to be happy all the time? But here's the problem. When positivity is forced, it stops being uplifting and starts being oppressive. And the longer we pretend, the heavier that mask becomes. The hidden exhaustion of emotional repression. People often talk about burnout as if it's just physical exhaustion, a result of overworking and lack of rest. But what's rarely discussed is emotional burnout, the exhaustion that comes from constantly suppressing how we truly feel. When people force themselves to be happy, especially in situations where sadness, frustration, or anger are justified, it creates an internal conflict. The mind is essentially fighting itself. One part is screaming that something is wrong. The other part is forcing a smile and pretending everything is fine. This constant emotional self-censorship doesn't just drain mental energy, it rewires the brain, making it harder to process emotions in a healthy way. Studies show that chronic emotional suppression can lead to increased anxiety and depression, higher levels of stress hormones like cortisol, weakened immune system, and long-term health issues, loss of genuine emotional connection with others. In other words, the more we fake happiness, the more we destroy our ability to feel real joy. Workplace positivity, a new form of exploitation. Nowhere is toxic positivity more evident than in the modern workplace. Companies don't just expect productivity, they expect enthusiasm. Employees aren't just required to work hard, they must also appear passionate, engaged, and endlessly motivated. The language of corporate culture has transformed. You're not overworked. You just need to find your passion. You're not underpaid. You should love what you do and money will follow. You're not burned out. You just need to adopt a positive mindset. It's not enough to simply do your job. You have to perform happiness while doing it. And if you express exhaustion or dissatisfaction, you're labeled as negative, not a team player, or worse, replaceable. This is why so many employees fake enthusiasm, push through exhaustion, and ignore their mental health, because in a system that rewards relentless positivity, admitting struggle feels like failure. The breaking point, when positivity becomes a prison. There's a moment that comes for everyone, when the mask starts to crack. It happens in the quiet moments when you're alone and finally let your guard down. Maybe it's after a long day of pretending to be okay. Maybe it's in the middle of the night when your mind won't let you sleep. Maybe it's when someone asks, Are you really okay? And you don't have the energy to lie. This is the moment when people realize they're exhausted not from life itself, but from the effort of constantly pretending. And that's the truth that toxic positivity tries to hide. Real happiness isn't about eliminating sadness, frustration, or anger. It's about allowing those emotions to exist without guilt or shame. Because the opposite of toxic positivity isn't negativity, it's authenticity. Escaping the trap, the power of emotional honesty. So how do we break free? The answer isn't to reject happiness altogether, but to redefine what it truly means. Real happiness isn't about being positive all the time. It's about being honest with yourself. Strength isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about facing them. True well-being doesn't come from forcing positivity, but from embracing the full range of human emotion. If you're exhausted, admit it. If you're struggling, talk about it. If you're sad, allow yourself to feel it, without apologizing, without explaining, without rushing to fix it. Because in the end, a forced smile is far heavier than an honest frown. And the moment you stop pretending is the moment you start healing. Social media and the performance of happiness. Imagine scrolling through your social media feed. Every post you see is a highlight reel. People traveling, celebrating, achieving. Everyone looks radiant, successful, fulfilled. No one seems to be struggling. No one seems sad, anxious, or lost. The message is clear. Happiness is not just a goal, it's a performance. Social media has transformed the way we express and experience emotions. In the digital age, happiness is not just something we feel, it's something we must display. We curate our lives, selecting only the most flattering moments, filtering out imperfections, and constructing a version of ourselves that aligns with what society expects. Constant positivity. But behind every carefully crafted post, behind every forced smile and perfectly staged photo, there's a question we rarely ask. Are we actually happy, or are we just pretending to be? The social media illusion. Why everyone looks happier than you. There's a psychological term called the availability heuristic. It means that our brains tend to judge reality based on the most easily available information. On social media, the most available information is endless streams of happiness, success, and excitement. We rarely see people posting about their loneliness, their self-doubt, or their failures. Instead, we see couples posting romantic moments but never their arguments, friends laughing together but never their moments of isolation, entrepreneurs celebrating success but never their financial struggles. Because we only see the highs and never the lows, our brains start to believe a distorted reality, that everyone else is living a perfect life while we are falling behind. And this creates a toxic cycle. We feel inadequate when comparing our real, messy lives to the perfect lives we see online. To compensate, we start curating our own happiness, posting only the best parts. Others see our curated happiness and feel inadequate, so they do the same. The cycle repeats until no one is truly happy, only performing happiness. The rise of toxic positivity in the digital age. The pressure to appear happy online has given birth to a new cultural phenomenon, toxic positivity. Social media bombards us with motivational quotes, good vibes only, slogans, and messages that tell us to stay positive no matter what. But what happens when someone expresses real pain online? They're told to cheer up. They're given empty advice like, just be grateful. They're silenced, ignored, or even shamed for spreading negativity. Social media has created an environment where there is no space for real emotions, only forced optimism. Sadness, anger, and frustration are treated as flaws rather than natural human experiences. Instead of allowing people to express their struggles, society pressures them to mask their emotions with forced positivity. And over time, this suppression doesn't just affect how we present ourselves online, it changes how we see ourselves in real life. When happiness becomes a performance, we lose ourselves. What happens when we spend years performing happiness? We start to lose touch with our true selves. Instead of asking, "How do I feel?" we ask, "How should I appear?" Instead of embracing our emotions, we edit them, filter them, and present only what is acceptable. This is why many people feel a deep sense of emptiness, despite having a perfect life online. They have built an image of happiness that doesn't match their inner reality, and the greater the gap between who we are and who we pretend to be, the more disconnected we become. Studies show that excessive social media use is linked to higher levels of depression and anxiety, lower self-esteem and increased body dissatisfaction, decreased ability to experience real joy and emotional connection. Ironically, the platforms designed to connect us have left us feeling more isolated than ever. Breaking the illusion, finding authenticity in a digital world. So how do we break free? The answer isn't to abandon social media altogether, but to change the way we use it. Recognize the illusion. Understand that what you see online is not reality. It's a carefully edited version of it. No one's life is as perfect as their feed suggests. Stop curating your emotions. You don't have to share every struggle publicly, but don't feel obligated to perform happiness just for validation. Allow yourself to be real, even if it's not Instagram-worthy. Follow people who promote authenticity. Unfollow accounts that make you feel inadequate. Surround yourself with voices that share real experiences, not just polished perfection. Take breaks and reconnect with real life. The more time you spend offline, the easier it becomes to detach from the pressures of online validation. Spend time with people who know the real you, not just the version you present online. Redefine happiness. True happiness isn't about looking happy, it's about feeling fulfilled, even when life isn't perfect. Because in the end, happiness is not a performance, it's not a brand, it's not an aesthetic. Happiness is a deeply personal, ever-changing experience, and the moment you stop performing it is the moment you start truly living it. Social media and the performance of happiness continue as so. Happiness as a commodity, when joy becomes a product. Happiness has always been a personal experience, something deeply felt rather than displayed. But in the age of social media, it has become something else entirely. A product. Brands, influencers, and even everyday users have turned happiness into a currency. The more joyful and exciting your life appears, the more likes, followers, and validation you receive. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok thrive on this dynamic, rewarding those who perform the best version of their lives. But what happens when happiness is no longer just a feeling, but a requirement? People start chasing validation instead of genuine joy. Instead of living in the moment, they focus on capturing the perfect shot. A dinner with friends turns into a content opportunity. A vacation becomes less about relaxation and more about proving something to an invisible audience. This constant need to show happiness rather than experience it creates a disconnect. Over time, people begin to feel emptier, despite appearing happier than ever. The pressure to perform, why we fake happiness. Online social media has conditioned us to believe that showing vulnerability is a weakness. Expressing sadness, doubt, or frustration feels risky because we know the internet rewards perfection, not authenticity. This leads to a phenomenon called emotional editing, where people carefully curate their emotions for public consumption. You may feel lonely, but instead of sharing that, you post a smiling selfie. You may be struggling financially, but you only show the moments where you appear successful. You may feel lost in life, but your online presence tells a different story, one of confidence and clarity. This creates a dangerous cycle. You pretend to be happy online, People believe you. They compare themselves to your fake happiness. They feel pressured to do the same. Everyone starts performing, and no one is truly happy. In the end, everyone feels alone in their struggles because no one is willing to admit they have them. Escaping the illusion, finding real happiness offline. The only way to break free from this cycle is to redefine happiness on your own terms, not based on what looks good online, but on what actually feels good in real life. Instead of focusing on capturing moments, focus on living them. Instead of chasing external validation, seek internal fulfillment. Instead of comparing your life to a highlight reel, remind yourself that social media is not reality. True happiness is messy, imperfect, and unfiltered. It's found in the quiet moments, not in likes, not in followers, not in how good your life appears to others. The question is, are you ready to stop performing and start living? The suppression of negative emotions. Why we need to feel sadness. The war on sadness. Why society fears negative emotions. Modern culture has declared war on sadness. Everywhere we turn, we are bombarded with messages urging us to be happy, grateful, and optimistic. Feeling down? Just think positive. Struggling? Just be grateful. But what if this obsession with happiness is actually making us weaker? Negative emotions, sadness, anger, frustration, grief, are an essential part of the human experience. Yet, society treats them as problems to be fixed rather than emotions to be felt. From self-help books to social media influencers, the message is clear. Happiness is a choice. You can control your emotions. If you're sad, it's your fault. But is this really true? Or is it a convenient lie designed to keep us from questioning deeper issues? The myth of emotional control. Why you can't just choose happiness. We are often told that happiness is a mindset, something we can control if we just try hard enough. But neuroscience tells a different story. Emotions are not simply choices. They are deeply rooted in our biology, shaped by experiences, memories, and even genetics. When we feel sad, our brain releases chemicals that signal distress. This isn't a failure, it's a survival mechanism. Forcing ourselves to suppress negative emotions doesn't make them disappear. Instead, they build up inside us, resurfacing in unexpected ways. Anxiety attacks that seem to come out of nowhere, sudden bursts of anger over small issues, a lingering sense of emptiness despite appearing happy. When we suppress sadness, we are not eliminating it. We are just delaying its consequences. Why feeling sadness is necessary for growth. Imagine a world where no one felt pain. On the surface, it might sound like paradise, but pain serves a purpose. It warns us when something is wrong. Emotional pain works the same way. Sadness is not just an inconvenience, it's an important signal. Grief teaches us what truly matters. Disappointment helps us understand our values. Failure forces us to grow and adapt. When we suppress sadness, we also suppress the lessons it brings. Instead of healing, we remain stuck, constantly chasing happiness without ever addressing what's truly making us unhappy. Breaking the cycle. Learning to embrace negative emotions. Instead of seeing sadness as the enemy, we must learn to accept it as part of life. This doesn't mean dwelling on negativity. It means allowing ourselves to feel, process, and move forward. Practice radical honesty. Allow yourself to acknowledge when you are struggling instead of pretending you're fine. Stop apologizing for being sad. You don't need permission to feel emotions. Reject toxic positivity. Surround yourself with people who validate your feelings rather than dismiss them. Seek meaning, not just happiness. True fulfillment comes from embracing the full spectrum of emotions, not just the pleasant ones. Because in the end, happiness is not the absence of sadness, it is the ability to experience both and still find meaning. the new form of control, why negativity is silenced, the happiness mandate, how society punishes negativity. We live in a world where happiness is not just encouraged, it's demanded. Complaining about work, you're ungrateful, feeling lost in life, you lack a growth mindset, struggling with mental health. You just need to think more positively. This relentless push for positivity is not just a personal mindset, it's a social expectation. Employers expect you to stay motivated, no matter how toxic the workplace. Social media rewards those who appear happy and silences those who express struggles. Even in personal relationships, people often avoid those who bring down the mood. This obsession with constant positivity creates a culture where real emotions are not allowed. But here's the question: who benefits from this forced happiness? The hidden power behind stay positive culture. At first glance, the positivity movement seems harmless, even helpful. But when we look deeper, we realize it serves a powerful function, controlling how we express dissatisfaction. Think about it. If everyone is forced to focus on staying positive, what happens to real criticism? Employees stop demanding better working conditions because they're told to stay grateful. Citizens stop questioning government policies because they should focus on the good. Individuals stop confronting personal struggles because they feel guilty for being negative. This creates a docile, compliant society where people accept their conditions without questioning them. When negativity is labeled as toxic, genuine problems go unaddressed. The algorithmic suppression of negative emotions, social media has amplified this trend. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube prioritize content that promotes positivity while suppressing content that challenges the status quo. Posts about struggles, burnout, or dissatisfaction often receive less engagement. The algorithm favors influencers who promote hustle culture and self-improvement over those who discuss mental health honestly. When someone speaks up about unfairness or systemic issues, they are often labeled as negative or complainers. This creates an illusion, a world where everyone seems happy, successful, and thriving. And when you're not, you start to wonder, is something wrong with me? In reality, many people are struggling, but the digital world hides that truth to maintain the illusion of universal happiness. Reclaiming the right to feel. Why criticism is not negativity. The first step to breaking free from this forced positivity is understanding that criticism is not negativity. It's necessary. Being dissatisfied with your job doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means you recognize unfairness. Acknowledging mental health struggles doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. Questioning authority doesn't make you a troublemaker. It makes you aware. Instead of suppressing negative emotions, we should use them as tools for change. Anger can drive movements for justice. Sadness can create deeper human connections. Frustration can lead to personal and societal growth. Because in the end, true happiness doesn't come from avoiding negativity. It comes from confronting reality and changing what needs to be changed. Have you been lied to about happiness? For years, we've been told that happiness is the ultimate goal of life. We chase it relentlessly through careers, relationships, self-improvement, and material success. And yet, despite all our efforts, many of us feel empty, exhausted, and unfulfilled. Why? Because we were sold an illusion. The version of happiness promoted by society isn't real happiness. It's a manufactured product designed to keep us consuming, working, and conforming. The idea that you should be constantly happy, always positive, and never dissatisfied is not just unrealistic, it's a form of control. But here's the truth. Real happiness doesn't come from avoiding discomfort. It comes from embracing the full spectrum of human emotions, escaping the consumerist trap of happiness. One of the biggest lies we've been told is that happiness can be bought. You'll be happy once you have the perfect house, car, or wardrobe. Happiness is just one more self-help book, fitness program, or life coach away. You need to achieve success before you can be truly happy. This belief keeps us trapped in a cycle of endless consumption. Instead of addressing what's truly missing in our lives, we are constantly searching for the next thing, the next product, achievement, or life hack that promises fulfillment. But real happiness isn't external. It doesn't come from what you own, how much money you make, or how perfect your life looks on Instagram. It comes from something much deeper. Redefining happiness. What actually brings fulfillment? If chasing external success doesn't lead to happiness, what does? Studies show that the most fulfilled people focus on meaning over pleasure. True happiness isn't about avoiding pain, but about finding meaning in your struggles. Deep connections, genuine relationships bring more long-term fulfillment than wealth or fame. Personal growth, accepting failures and challenges as part of life rather than avoiding them. Authenticity, living in alignment with your values, not society's expectations. The key isn't to eliminate sadness or discomfort, it's to accept them as part of a meaningful life. Practical steps to free yourself from the illusion. Breaking free from the happiness illusion isn't easy, but it's possible. Here's how. Stop chasing constant happiness. Accept that it's normal to have ups and downs. Question societal expectations. Are your goals truly yours, or were they given to you? Reduce social media influence. Stop comparing your life to curated online illusions. Embrace discomfort. Growth comes from struggle, not avoidance. Have real conversations. Surround yourself with people who value authenticity over performance. When you stop chasing happiness and start living authentically, you'll discover something unexpected. True happiness isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about embracing the full human experience. The modern definition of happiness. A flawed perspective. What comes to mind when you think of happiness? For many, it's a life free of stress, pain, and struggle, a constant state of joy and satisfaction. This is the version of happiness we've been sold through self-help books, social media influencers, and corporate marketing. But here's the problem. This definition is not only unrealistic, but also harmful. It sets an impossible standard, making you feel like you're failing when you experience sadness or frustration. It promotes avoidance, pushing people to suppress negative emotions rather than confront them. It turns happiness into a destination rather than something that exists in the present. If we've been looking at happiness all wrong, then what does real happiness actually look like? The difference between pleasure and true happiness. One of the biggest misconceptions about happiness is that it's about feeling good all the time. In reality, what most people chase is pleasure, not happiness. Pleasure is temporary. Buying new things gives you a dopamine hit, but the excitement fades. Getting social media likes makes you feel validated, but it's short-lived. Winning an award or achieving a goal is thrilling, but then you ask, what's next? Happiness, on the other hand, is long-term fulfillment. It doesn't come from constant excitement. It comes from a deep sense of purpose, connection, and authenticity. True happiness is being able to say, my life has meaning. I am living according to my values. I accept both joy and struggle as part of life. Ancient wisdom. What philosophy teaches us about happiness? Modern society may have confused happiness with success, but ancient thinkers understood it differently. Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca. Happiness is about mastering your emotions and accepting life's challenges. Buddhism, suffering is part of existence, and happiness comes from detachment from material desires. Aristotle, eudaimonia. The highest form of happiness comes from living virtuously and fulfilling your potential. These ideas all share a common truth. Real happiness isn't about eliminating negative emotions. It's about learning to live with them in a meaningful way. A new definition: happiness as a byproduct, not a goal. If you want to be happy, stop chasing happiness itself. Instead, focus on purpose, engaging in work, relationships, and activities that bring deeper fulfillment; growth, accepting failures and struggles as necessary for personal evolution; authentic relationships, prioritizing deep, meaningful connections over superficial validation; living in the present, not postponing happiness for one day when everything is perfect. Because in the end, happiness is not something you find, it's something you create through the way you live. If there's one thing to take away from this video, it's this: happiness is not what you've been told. For too long, we've been trapped in a cycle of chasing an illusion, believing that happiness is something we must achieve, buy, or perfect. We've been conditioned to think that any negative emotion is a failure, that success equals fulfillment, and that smiling through pain makes us strong. But the truth is far more complex. Happiness is not about constant positivity. It's not about suppressing discomfort or pretending life is perfect. Real happiness is about embracing life as it is, both the beauty and the struggle. It's about rejecting the toxic pressure to be happy all the time. It's about allowing yourself to feel sadness, anger, and frustration, because they are part of the human experience. It's about defining happiness on your own terms, not the terms society has forced upon you. So, the question now is, will you keep chasing the illusion, or will you start living? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree? Have you ever felt trapped by the pressure to always be happy? Let's have a real conversation. And if this video made you think, consider subscribing. There's a lot more to uncover about the hidden truths of modern society. See you in the next one.